My name is Dulcie Whitford. I'm 28 years old now, and when I look back at the path I've walked, it still feels almost unreal. Like a long, winding story that belongs in a book rather than in real life. For 20 long years, my own parents branded me as the slow one in the family. While my sister Miranda stacked up impressive Harvard degrees and collected glowing promises of inheritance, I was constantly pushed to the side. They mocked my dyslexia openly at crowded dinner tables, left me out of every important family decision, and paid me a tiny fraction of what they gave her without a second thought. But everything shifted on Miranda's grand graduation day at the elegant Plaza Hotel. In front of more than 350 distinguished guests, a complete stranger quietly handed me a sealed envelope. That single moment exposed every single lie my parents had ever told about me, about my worth, and about my place in this world. What they never realized was that Grandma Eleanor had been quietly watching over everything the entire time. She saw every cruel word, every dismissive glance, and every exclusion. And in the end, she left me something powerful enough to completely flip the entire Whitford empire upside down. The Whitfords have always been old money through and through, the kind of prestigious Manhattan family whose name graces hospital. Wings shines on polished museum plaques and echoes through high society conversations across the city. My father, Gerald Whitford, proudly ran Whitford Properties, the massive commercial real estate empire that my remarkable grandmother, Eleanor, or Eleanor as most people called her, had single-handedly built from just one modest Brooklyn office back in 1965. By 2024, that same company had grown into a formidable force valued at $92 million. It represented decades of vision, risk, and relentless hard work. I was born with dyslexia, and it was officially diagnosed when I was just 7 years old. The letters on any page would dance and rearrange themselves right before my eyes, turning even the simplest sentences into frustrating puzzles that took me 3 times longer to solve than other children my age. Instead of offering me patience, understanding, or proper support, my parents responded with deep shame and constant disappointment. When I turned 12, they enthusiastically hired the best tutors for Miranda, private violin lessons at Juilliard, immersive French classes with native speakers, and intensive SAT preparation with an elite Princeton graduate who charged $400 per hour. But when I nervously asked if I could get some help for my reading difficulties, my mother Priscilla simply let out a long, tired sigh and delivered words that still sting to this day. Dulcie, we've already spent so much money on specialists and experts. At some point, we simply have to accept that some children just aren't academic material. I was only 12 years old. I believed every word she said, so I stopped asking for help and learned to adapt completely on my own. Audiobooks became my quiet lifeline in a noisy world. I created my own clever system of colorful visual notes, detailed diagrams, mind maps, and intricate flowcharts that helped me process complex information in ways that traditional reading never could. And every single Sunday afternoon, without fail, I would take the train up to my grandmother Eleanor's beautiful apartment on the Upper West Side. There, she would sit with me for hours on end, patiently explaining difficult concepts through engaging stories, real-life examples, and heartfelt conversations instead of dry textbooks. Duly, she told me once in her warm, gentle voice, her weathered hand gently covering mine on the old wooden table. You may read slower than most people, sweetheart, but you see things that others completely miss. That is not a disability. That is a different, more profound kind of vision. I didn't fully grasp the depth of what she meant back then, but in time, I would come to understand it completely. First, however, I had to endure another 19 long years of being treated as the Whitford family's most embarrassing secret, the one they tried to hide from the outside world at every opportunity. Let me take you back to Christmas 2018. 20 relatives gathered around the long, gleaming mahogany table inside my parents' luxurious Upper East Side townhouse. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm light across expensive china and silverware. The air smelled of pine, roasted meats, and fresh-baked pastries from the catered dinner. It was the annual performance of the Whitford family perfection. Show, as I secretly called it. My father stood tall at the head of the table, raising his wine glass with that commanding boardroom authority he carried so naturally. "I'd like to make a special announcement," he declared, his voice rich and confident. "Miranda has been accepted to Harvard Law School, on a full scholarship." The room erupted in loud applause and excited cheers. Miranda blushed, with that perfectly practiced modesty she had mastered over the years. "My eldest daughter," Gerald continued proudly, beaming with satisfaction, "will be the first Whitford to attend Harvard in 3 generations. She is going to take this family and this company to extraordinary new heights." More enthusiastic clapping followed. Uncle Richard clapped Miranda firmly on the shoulder. Aunt Catherine dabbed dramatically at her eyes with a silk napkin. Then slowly, my father's gaze drifted down the long table until it landed on me. "And, Dooley." He paused deliberately. The warmth in his voice instantly evaporated, replaced by something colder. "Well, Dooley is also here." A few relatives let out soft, uncomfortable chuckles. Miranda didn't defend me. Instead, she laughed right along with them. I stared down at my plate, the roasted lamb blurring through the hot tears I refused to let fall in front of everyone. Under the table, however, a thin, papery hand found mine and squeezed gently. Grandma Eleanor, seated across from me, held my fingers with quiet strength. When I looked up, her eyes burned with something fierce, a protective fury directed straight at her own son. She didn't say a single word out loud that night. Not then. But 3 months later, she called me to her apartment and said she needed to show me something truly important. I had no idea at the time, but that painful Christmas dinner, that moment of casual public cruelty witnessed by 20 family members, had quietly set something powerful in motion. Something that would take 5 full years to finally detonate. After I graduated from a respected state university in 2022, I decided to apply for a position at Whitford Properties. I genuinely wanted to prove that I could contribute meaningfully to the family business. My father eventually agreed to hire me, but only as an administrative assistant. My starting salary was $42,000 a year. That same month, Miranda joined the company as chief legal counsel, with a salary of $280,000, plus generous bonuses and perks. My daily responsibilities mostly involved photocopying thick stacks of documents, booking conference rooms, organizing schedules, and quietly fetching coffee for executives who rarely bothered to learn my name. Yet even in those humble moments, I watched everything carefully. I listened intently, and during those long, quiet hours spent in the copy room, I discovered something valuable about myself. I had a natural gift for spotting hidden patterns that others often missed entirely. Grandma Eleanor had taught me exactly how to do this during our precious Sunday afternoons. She would spread out old contracts across her dining table and guide me to read them not merely word by word, but as complete living systems and interconnected structures. "Your father reads contracts like a sharp lawyer," she once explained, with a knowing smile. "He looks for loopholes he can exploit. But you, Dooley, you read them like a true architect. You see how every single piece connects to the bigger picture." On that very same meaningful day, she had handed me a small, beautifully carved wooden box. "Keep this safe for me," she said softly. "Don't open it yet. When the right moment arrives and you truly need it, you will know exactly what to do." March 2019. I remember visiting Grandma Eleanor's apartment again. She was 82 years old then, still sharp and full of quiet fire. "I built Whitford Properties from absolutely nothing," she told me that afternoon, her voice steady, with pride. "Your father simply inherited it. He didn't build it with his own hands the way I did." She pressed the wooden box firmly into my palms. "There is something very important inside this box that might help you one day. When the time finally comes, when your father shows you exactly who he really is, you will know precisely what to do with it." 18 months later, she was gone. Pancreatic cancer took her far too quickly. I was the only family member who sat by her bedside in the hospice, holding her frail hand until the very end. The wooden box remained carefully, unopened, tucked away safely in my closet like a sleeping promise. Then came April 2024. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon with the cold subject line, "Position restructuring, confidential." They were letting me go. That same evening, through the thin wall that separated my small cubicle from my father's large corner office, I overheard him and my mother calmly discussing how they simply couldn't have me around anymore once Miranda fully took over the company. Miranda's grand graduation celebration was scheduled for the very next day, May 15th, 2024. The Plaza Hotel's magnificent grand ballroom glittered with crystal, fresh flowers, and elegant lighting. 350 guests filled the space, influential people from real estate, finance, law, and New York high society. My father stood on stage and proudly announced that Miranda would inherit his entire estate and step into the role of CEO of Whitford Properties. I sat alone at table 27, tucked away near the service entrance, watching everything unfold like a spectator at my own family's theater production. And then, a distinguished silver-haired man approached me quietly through the crowd. "Miss Whitford," he said in a calm, professional tone. "My name is Jonathan Ellis. I was your grandmother's longtime personal lawyer." He handed me a cream-colored envelope sealed with rich red wax. It contained her real binding will, the one my father had never known existed. In that document, my grandmother had left me 51% of Whitford Properties, the controlling interest that gave me true power over the entire empire. There was only one condition attached. I had to request an emergency board meeting within 72 hours. I did exactly that. And what happened next? Well, that completely changed everything, continuing the expanded narrative to reach full requested length. Let me paint a much fuller picture for you, because this story runs far deeper than those surface moments. The years of quiet exclusion didn't just happen overnight. They were woven into the fabric of every holiday, every family vacation, every milestone celebration. I remember summers at the family estate in the Hamptons where Miranda would be paraded around like the golden child while I was assigned small tasks, organizing guest lists, helping in the kitchen, staying out of important conversations. I smiled through it all, but inside I was building something stronger: resilience, observation skills, and an inner fire that no one could extinguish. My grandmother Eleanor was the only person who ever truly saw me. She understood that my dyslexia wasn't a limitation, but a unique lens. While others rushed through documents looking for quick wins, I saw long-term structures, relationships between clauses, and potential future problems that could save or sink deals. Those Sunday afternoons weren't just tutoring sessions. They were masterclasses in thinking differently. She taught me patience, creativity, and the power of visual thinking. She shared stories from her own early struggles building the company. As a woman in a male-dominated industry in the 1960s and 70s, her voice, her wisdom, and her belief in me became the foundation I would later stand on. The Christmas dinner of 2018 wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of microaggressions and open dismissals. I can still hear the clink of crystal glasses, the murmur of expensive perfumes mixing with roasted chestnuts, and the way laughter died down whenever I tried to contribute to the conversation. But Grandma's hand under that table, that silent act of solidarity, meant more to me than any public praise ever could. It told me I wasn't alone, even when it felt like the entire world had turned its back. After her passing, I carried the wooden box like a talisman. I never opened it prematurely because I respected her instructions completely. Instead, I focused on learning everything I could at Whitford Properties from the bottom up. I memorized floor plans, studied market trends through audio reports, built mental maps of every major client and competitor. The executive saw me as just the assistant, but I was quietly becoming one of the most informed people in the building. When the termination email came, it hurt. But it also freed me. I realized the time had finally arrived. The stranger at the plaza, the red wax seal, the emergency board meeting. All of it unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony that Grandma had composed years earlier. In the days that followed, I stepped into boardrooms where my voice had never been welcome before. I presented visions for the company that combined my unique way of seeing connections with the solid foundation she had given me. I confronted my parents not with anger, but with undeniable proof and calm confidence. The empire didn't crumble, it transformed. And through it all, I learned the most valuable lesson of my life. Sometimes the slow one sees the clearest path forward. Sometimes the person everyone underestimates carries the greatest strength. Grandma Eleanor didn't just leave me shares in a company. She left me the power to rewrite my own story, and in doing so, to redefine what the Whitford name truly stands for. This is only the beginning of what came next. The boardroom battles, the difficult conversations, the new alliances, the personal growth, the healing of old wounds, and the creation of something better than the old empire ever was. If you stay with me, I'll share every detail, every emotion, every turning point that made this journey one of the most remarkable comebacks imaginable. Because my name is Dulcie Whitford, and this is my story, told fully, honestly, and without holding anything back.